Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Drew Firment, the Chief Cloud Strategist at Pluralsight. Drew, good to have you with us again.
It's great to be here.
And our topic is cloud and cloud enablement. And this is a perennial topic, but it's one that's always changing. There's always something new. So let's begin with where is the government in cloud from your standpoint?
Yeah, so look, Cloud Smart is obviously a huge driver. Pluralsight's actively engaged with a lot of these federal civilian agencies to upskill their workforce, right, with modern IT skills. Um, One of the key challenges identified by the Government Accounting Office with Cloud Smart strategy is the ability to build and maintain a skilled workforce, right? And that is a common theme even in the private sector. It's interesting to note that IDC just reported that the impacts of the ongoing skills gap with technologists will cost organizations 5.5 trillion by 2026, right? That's a pretty big number. 5.5 trillion in impacts. Uh, Pluralsight just published a report, 2024 Tech Skills Report, that shows similar findings. 78% of organizations are abandoning projects simply due to a skills gap. So like that's something that Pluralsight is very focused on. It drives my everyday actions and solutions, and we're really focused on helping these agencies mitigate that impact of the skills gap. And really ultimately teaching the federal government how to use cloud computing and AI so they can more effectively, achieve their missions. And it's been well over a decade, Tom, since federal agencies have embarked on using cloud computing to perform their missions, right? Their goal is to be, more effective, secure, and ultimately, less expensive for taxpayers, right? So it is encouraging to see agencies like Homeland Security, Treasury, Labor, Agriculture, they're making progress on their IT modernization efforts, specifically using cloud computing. But while they're making these steady gains with cloud computing, they're still facing a lot of challenges, and a lot of those challenges mirror what we're seeing in the private sector. So the top two challenges remain. Cybersecurity, number one, and the need for a skilled workforce is number two. And what's interesting to note, Tom, is that those two challenges are often related, right? So the Government Accounting Office looked at those four agencies that I mentioned, and they wanted to see how they implemented those like six key cloud security practices, things like continuous monitoring and having a plan to actually respond to incidents. And while the agencies implemented some of the practices, not a single one of them implemented all of the practices on, for their system. So, and a lot of that is when you look at traditional on-prem or legacy IT environments, most of the deployments are handled by like these centralized teams that typically are responsible for reviewing some of the security settings or configurations, right? As agencies are shifting towards building applications in the cloud, developers without a lot of cybersecurity experience
Sure.
are now responsible for actually, provisioning and deploying that code. So as a result, you got a skills gap there, and it's not surprised it's one of the top barriers. And
As the GAO would say, progress, but still some things to do left, which gets to the idea of along comes artificial intelligence now. And as cloud was described as an enabler of modernization and of mission delivery, what's your sense about AI? Same issues with workforce and so forth. And is AI an enabler or is something need to enable AI?
yeah, well, look, we are starting to see emerging technologies like AI and machine learning being deployed. And a lot of that is actually to help improve capabilities like cybersecurity, right? And as cloud environments and data footprints are starting to expand to support AI, ultimately this focus on security is going to be even more critical to protect that data. So AI is definitely one of the emerging technologies that's expected to have a pretty major impact, right, on agencies. It's like 87% of organizations are expected to adopt AI by 2024, right? It's here. Federal agencies are really no exception. We're at varying degrees of adoption right now into the existing process. It's showing a lot of promise, especially with operational efficiencies, things like analytical tools to improve our decision-making process. But what's interesting is a lot of this is based upon that underlying data, right? So you have agencies that are starting to experiment using their own version of the large language models to help deliver on their missions more effectively. And cloud is certainly making it easier. Platforms like AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, kind of come with AI in a box and machine learning tools, right? So that makes it a lot easier for these agencies to quickly consume and develop these AI applications. And ultimately, it needs to be an evolution from cloud computing versus this revolution, right? Cloud provides that underlying infrastructure. It provides the services with that scalability, elasticity, resiliency, reliability, security, all those great things about cloud. So agencies now have the ability to scale AI using cloud, much easier in terms of
Sure.
scaling it up or down without incurring a lot of upfront costs. But,
All right. And what
yeah.
are the unique skills that the workforce needs then to manage all of these qualities of cloud and as they increasingly get powered by AI and application development in the cloud, all of the things you've mentioned that are the trends, what are the specific skills needed
Yeah,
to
I think some of the
succeed?
advanced skills that's interesting is, ultimately it's going to be data engineering because data is what fuels AI, right? And that's allowing it to learn and make those decisions. But really at this point, I mean, the government has still been, focused on heavily the general IT skills to maintain these legacy systems. And those kind of revolve around the administration of databases, networks, and operating systems, right? With the advent of cloud computing and AI, you're requiring a little bit more specialized skills. And that's a big part of the cloud smart strategy, right? So it was interesting to note that OPM recently announced the launch of a major overhaul, right, for federal government hiring process, transitioning to fully skills-based approach. I think it's by the summer of 2024. So what are those skills, right? What do we mean when we talk about those skills that are going to be required for this modern IT, cloud smart strategy? A lot of those skills start with basic cloud architecture, right? Those require like understanding of basic cloud native practices, basic literacy for things like infrastructure as code, how to take advantage of those services for resiliency, scalability, elasticity, right? So if I say, hey, we want to spin up a VPC with an IGW and use ELB with EC2 and EBS and RDS, right? You need to understand that alphabet soup and what's that shorthand for in terms of spinning up a cloud environment with a server, storage, and database, right? Great way to get started, I think, is with cloud certifications from all the major cloud providers. That's an excellent way to validate your skills. And then from there, you really want to go into the deeper, more specialized cloud expertise, like cloud security, which is obviously a huge priority for government agencies. So that really is important to understand. Well, now you have understanding of the cloud services. Well, how do you leverage access control or encryption services to protect, what's being built natively in the cloud, right? So I talked about literacy. Really from there, you got to drive to fluency, right? So that's that hands-on experiential learning, putting the paper into practice. So that's a big part of retaining that knowledge. And I think the last thing you just put a fine point on it, right? You can provide all the resources you want, but you really have to provide the workforce the time to learn, right? And that means leaders need to be actively engaged with upskilling their agencies versus just throwing links at teams, right? So leaders should be spending as much time migrating their talent to the cloud as they are migrating the applications to the cloud.
All right. And you've named a lot of areas from the generalized understanding the architecture to very specific.
Mhm.
And if I ever need a leader through this, to someone to hold my hand, I know who I'm going to ask. But what skills training solutions are out there for IT departments and to help them get their people to where they need to be?
Yeah, well, it is encouraging to see that skills development is now, a pretty significant investment for the federal government, and they're making those investments in their professionals to help their workforce, better manage and secure their cloud computing system. So, the best investment an individual can make is in themselves with these skills, right? So these critical skills gap, it's interesting that the IT staff is actually the one bearing the biggest burden of that, right? I mean, almost all technologists are saying that their workloads have increased due to the skills gap. So it certainly is self-serving to get everybody in your organization to try to get upskilled so you don't, have to abandon projects anymore. So, look, as part of Cloud Smart strategy, federal agencies are investing in skills development platforms like Pluralsight, right? So we offer on-demand courses, live labs, sandboxes for hands-on experiential, for not just cloud computing, but for AI, and along with all the different certification programs. It's interesting to note as part of this, Tom, that over $1 trillion of that impacted from skills gap is expected to be recovered from organizations who leverage the efficiencies of Gen AI, right? So that includes incorporating AI into upskilling efforts, right? The efficiency gains from AI will help to lessen the impact of that $5.5 trillion. So in addition to offering our online training catalog across the different cloud providers and cloud adjacent, we're actually using AI ourselves to help with the learning journey, right? You could map out a learning journey or quickly find the right content for a technical challenge or question, using AI. So Tom, you won't need to call me directly anymore. You can just use our AI solution as well. But
All
yeah,
right.
it's really an evolution of skills, right? Not an evolution. And it's really important with AI on the horizon right now to really focus on the fundamentals.
Drew Firment is the Chief Cloud Strategist at Pluralsight. Thanks so much for being with us.
Great to be here, Tom. Thank you for having me.
And I'm Federal Drive host Tom Temin. You're watching Federal News Network. Let's go back to the studio now for more on the Cloud Exchange.